Hello and welcome to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We're
Woo.
back from a few weeks off. We are excited to be back with you
Yes.
today. We will be talking about Alien Romulus. Caleb, how excited are you? I know you're a big fan of the Alien franchise. How excited are you about talking about this movie?
I am. I'm excited about this one. I can't wait to
Excellent.
get into Alien
Cool.
Romulus. It's
Well,
going to be
first,
fun, man.
let's do some housekeeping, though. Let people know that we are brought to you by progressivechristianity.org. As we always say, it's a fantastic place for all your progressive Christian needs. We highly encourage you to go check them out. And also make sure you're following us on Facebook, The Moonshine Jesus Show, and make sure that you've got us scheduled to download your podcast, any of the place you get your podcast. Make sure you're following us there as well. And finally, and most importantly in the housekeeping, there are spoilers ahead, so be prepared. We do not go into this lightly. We go in headstrong, ready to spoil everything we can. Is that not correct, Caleb?
We're going to spoil this for you, and we're going to delight in doing it.
Absolutely. Well, we also need some drinks before we begin that difficult work. What have you decided to go with today?
Cocktail called the Alien Romulus cocktail.
Oh.
And so it consists of black vodka,
of course,
and some pomegranate cranberry juice, and some fresh squeezed lemon juice, and it comes out in this kind of dark red, kind of ominous. So that color, I think that's really good for the blood that's about to be spilled as we talk about these xenomorphs killing people. So that's what I've got. An actual Alien Romulus cocktail developed just for this movie. What have you got today, awesome. Mark?
Well, mine isn't made for the movie, but it sounds like it is. It's called an Alien Secretion.
I love that. Yeah.
It's vodka, pineapple juice, coconut rum, and Midori, and it really comes out kind of a weird
green
alien green. Yeah. So cheers, sir. Here's to a good show.
Cheers. Enjoy your secretion.
Absolutely. We'll catch y'all after the drop.
Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus. Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Hello, and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. Today we are, of course, talking about Alien Romulus, and we are going to geek out for just a little bit about this movie. And after we get done geeking out, we'll dive into some more serious things, some theology and politics. But, you know, Alien Romulus is a part of the Alien franchise, and there's a lot there to geek out about. So this is set between the film Alien and Aliens. And if you're not familiar with the franchise, this is the period of time in which Ripley, Sigourney Weaver's badass alien killer, is in cryo sleep after shoving a xenomorph, an alien, out of an airlock at the end of the first film. Between that time and the second film, when she wakes up and then kills a planet full of aliens. You see what I did there, Mark?
Yeah,
Alien and aliens. This movie introduces us to a new cast of characters who, in a desperate attempt to flee a mining colony, end up in a space station that is divided into two sections, Romulus and Remus. And the rest of the movie goes pretty much as you might expect, as a xenomorph picks them off one by one and they fight for survival. So, Mark, I'm curious, what's your familiarity with the Alien franchise? Did you like it? Not like it? How do you feel about it?
Well, I've watched them all. I love the first two aliens that you just described. Almost all the rest of them I thought were fine. But I admittedly, I'm not like I'm not as deep of a geek about Alien as I am about most science fiction fantasy stuff. It runs a little bit towards the sci-fi horror, and those don't always do it for me. So I know enough, but I am certainly not the connoisseur that you probably are of aliens.
I don't know if I'm a connoisseur, but I do love these movies. But also with the caveat that I have the preferences that you have. So
Yeah.
Alien I thought was wonderful. Aliens was
Oh,
fantastic, and then there was a real decline
quickly.
in quality. Yes, Alien 3
Oh
not good.
gosh,
Alien
not watchable.
Resurrection
Even worse.
terrible.
Yeah.
And Alien versus Predator, maybe the worst of all. Now, whenever Ridley Scott came back to the
Right.
helm in the
Prometheus was pretty good.
2010s, Prometheus pretty good, Alien Covenant pretty good, but
Yeah.
but not of the same quality as these first two. And Mark, since we had a little break in Moonshine Jesus show, what I did was I went back and I watched a bunch of old sci-fi movies. And one of the things I thought was really cool about movies like Alien and Aliens
Yeah.
is that they use practical effects and
Ah, I
hold
know.
up pretty well. And
Mhm.
so I think that upon a rewatch, Alien and Aliens hold up pretty well. Do you think this movie is going to hold up pretty well as time goes on?
I think it actually will. I
Yeah.
like because there was still a lot of practical effects that were in
Uh-huh.
it. Well, we didn't. There was some CGI, but it wasn't
Yeah.
heavy-handed.
Yeah.
And it looked to me like in every place that they could use practical, they were. And I was just having a conversation with a friend the other day, talking about a show that we're going to talk about next week, Beetlejuice,
Yeah.
comparing practical and CGI
Mhm.
and how stuff
Yeah.
that's practical tends to hold up better over time.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the case here as well. So yeah, I have a feeling that this is going to hold up well. It was a nice blending
Yeah.
of kind of all of the Alien movies. We had the
Yeah.
dark, gritty blue collar, but we also had the Evil
Uh-huh.
Company,
Yeah.
and the visuals were very good throughout this, and the music was outstanding as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
this one, I think this one will stand up pretty well
Yeah.
going forward. I mean, did you think the same or?
Oh, I think you're right, and I think you're absolutely right about practical effects holding up better over the long term. And so, as I
Yeah.
was watching those old sci-fi movies, we've watched a lot of say Star Wars prequel movies and stuff from the late '90s,
Right.
early 2000s with early CGI, and that doesn't hold up at all, right?
No,
So I think
no.
I think this holds up pretty well. And I think you're right too about the music, Mark, and the sound editing. One of the moments that caught me really early on with this was just that we open up in silence, and that doesn't
Mm,
happen a lot in
right.
movies, but I was very aware of it because
Mhm.
I was in this theater and I could hear everything going on, and I was just kind of struck by the vastness of space as I was just watching the movie open in silence. What do
Mhm.
you think about that opening, Mark?
I
Just
thought it was a really smart opening, um, and it's risky too to open a
it's
movie that
risky.
you're hoping to be a big movie, to
Mhm.
open it in pure silence. You could lose people pretty quickly if the visuals don't match up to the silence and the visuals don't capture your imagination in some way. And I thought they really handled it well. I
Yeah.
was like you, I was very aware that there was no sound.
Hmm.
And I really liked it. I mean, it
Yeah.
if anything, it drew me in because there was no
Yeah.
sound. It just made me more intrigued, and it felt like a promise about
Yeah.
about the thoughtfulness
Mm.
of the rest of the movie, and I
Yeah.
liked that.
I liked it too, and I just was. I don't know why I had the kind of this like existential moment in the middle of like at the beginning of an alien movie, but I'm like,
Right?
wow, space is like really vast and it's like really quiet and cold, and we don't know what's out in space. And I'm sitting here in a movie theater, and wow, I'm really small as a part of all this. I don't know that that's what they wanted, but like for a
That's
moment,
where
I'm
you
like, wow. I have no idea that's
yeah.
what's out there or what's coming. So, Mark, we've talked about a couple of the movies being pretty
Yeah.
good, and a lot of them being really bad, and some being
Mm.
mediocre. So, where does Alien Romulus fall on that scale for you as a whole? And what did you think about the approach of setting this between the first two movies?
Um, I think they nailed it. I think this is the third best movie in the franchise.
Yeah.
And I'm glad it was stuck between the other two best movies in terms of the timeline. That's my answer. I think it's it's a good movie. It's not as good as the first two, but it's engaging. It's good. It's a much more simplistic storyline than the first two.
Yes.
And it's not quite as claustrophobic feeling, but there's a little of that. But it's so engaging that the actress in particular, Kaylee Spiney, who's essentially Ripley in this movie,
right?
Is exceptional, like so
She's
good
very
in
good.
this role.
Yeah,
and so I think this one will hold up for quite a while, and it will be the number 3 in my ranking of Alien movies for sure.
I think it's definitely number 3
to the others. Yeah.
I think. I mean,
Prometheus might come a little close, but it's such a While that's an alien movie, it's not exactly an alien movie.
Right. And I guess it's not like it's a real high bar to come in third on on this franchise's spectrum, but definitely third for me too. And I thought it was creative to set it in this time. It also answers the question as to why Ripley is not in this, and I thought it was
so smart. And how often do we get what do they call them? Intraquel movies instead of a sequel? It's an intraquel.
Never.
I learned that word just because of this movie. I didn't even know that was a word.
Got it, and have now been reintroduced to it. So thank you, Mark. Okay, I've got a question for you. I was thinking about this as I was watching this, because one of the kind of twists in the original Alien movie is that we find out one of the main characters is actually an android, and then in this, Ash the android comes back, and we get to see him, and he's one of the antagonists. And so one of the commentaries that Alien often makes is on technology as well, and some of the dangers of technology and all. And so in this movie, we get Ash, who was portrayed by an actor who has since died. And so they used AI deepfake technology to kind of bring this character back to life with the family's permission. They got permission from his
widow.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what did you think about the decision to bring Ash back? He's the character that comes back. And what did you think about the decision to bring him back in the way that they did, using AI when he's portraying an android who is supposed to make us cautious about technology?
It's sort of a meta level like viewing, isn't it? When you realize what's going on, the levels. So I got 2 answers for that. For the movie, I liked it. I like that there is this like this one kind of like, this is how we manufacture, androids. It's just how we do it, and we keep using the mold that we had. I like that. I like that he continued, and we had the same voice. It kind of pulled back the memories of the original. So for the movie, I really liked that choice. It made sense within the world. Within movies in general, the idea of bringing back someone who has passed, we're in this weird state, I think, where a lot of the folks who are passing like in the last several years would not have thought that the technology would ever be good enough to bring them back. So they couldn't have put in their contracts whether or not they were okay with it or not. I think that ultimately that's where movies have to go in terms of contracts. If we're going to be bringing people back, that individual needs to have contractually said, yes, you can use my likeness in further movies going forward around whatever the franchise is, because we can't get into the point where we have grandchildren making choices of whether a grandfather they never knew's image and likeness could be, because they're just going to, they might just do it for the money at that point. You just don't know. You think people would do that. And so for me, I think we're in a weird place where we just kind of have to deal with the fact that you've got to ask someone who is related to them if it's okay. But moving forward, we need to start being proactive about putting that into contracts so that individuals can make the choice about how their image is used after they're no longer are with us. What do you think about it?
Yeah, so I agree that it worked pretty well in the movies. I was aware of the fact, obviously, that it looked a little CGI.
It looked a little
the CGI
CGI.
was it was
It
pretty
looked
good.
AI. AI is what
Yeah,
I would. It looked AI
Yeah,
a
I
little
mean,
bit.
you know that moment where your brain just kind of knows that it's not
Yeah, you're like,
real.
wait a minute,
The
no.
the
Right.
uncanny valley kind of thing.
Exactly.
And so so it took me out of the movie a little bit,
Mhm.
but not too
That's
much.
fair.
I thought it was okay. But yeah, I agree with you. I think this is a weird place that we're in, and movie studios have been doing this for quite a while to various degrees. I think about Back to the Future 2 and
Right.
Crispin Glover, you know, and them using his image, making the mask and all, and then him suing the studio for doing that without his permission.
And that was a little bit different. That they didn't even try to get permission. They just
They didn't
did
even
it.
try. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is completely a problem. Yeah.
Right. And so I think one of the reasons, though, that they try to get permission nowadays is because he sued them, and
That's probably
that
true, yeah.
established precedent.
Yeah.
And so I think that you're right that studios would likely to take whatever likeness they can. I'm also
Yeah.
I got to say it makes me, I guess, a little maybe like both excited and uncomfortable, because I think about like Bruce Willis, who sold his likeness so that
Yeah.
he can continue to be, you know, used, or even James Earl Jones, who sold his voice so that he can continue to be the voice of Darth Vader. And so on the one hand, I say, hey, look, these things that I'm nostalgic about can continue to live on, be created in new ways. And yet it also makes me feel like, I don't know. Like
Yeah.
maybe we should be bringing in new actors for these things. I don't know how I feel about it, Mark. And so I
mean, I think, and this is very unlike me to say.
Yeah.
I think we should just allow the market to decide when we use. Like, if an
Oh,
actor,
you're such a capitalist.
I know I am. It's amazing. Everybody says I'm not, but look at me.
I think that's the first time I have ever heard you use the word market. Like,
Market
let's let the market
in a positive
decide. No, I
way.
don't think I've ever heard that
You're
phrase
right.
come out of your mouth.
You're
Yeah.
completely
Okay.
right. But I really do think in this case, that's the
Okay.
wise thing to do. As long as the individual has said, yeah, if you want it, you can have it. You can use my image, you can use my voice. If they've said that, then let the market decide what they most want. Do they like if you use James Earl Jones and people are kind of done with it because he's not around and they realize what you've done, well, then you're gonna suffer because of it. And maybe you end up having to recast. So I kind of it felt weird coming out of my mouth just saying it. It really it's like, oh, am I arguing that the market should
thank God we've got this recorded so that we can remember this in perpetuity.
Thank God that
the markets can decide.
Thank God that I'm the editor. I might have to go and like I might have to do some research and come up with a different word than market. Let the people decide. Maybe that's what it will be. I was going to say, let the people decide. Power to the people.
Power to the people. The people are going to decide this. Hey, look, I would love to talk more about that and more about this movie and geek out about it a little bit more. But there is some theology and politics, hard as it might be to believe in an alien movie, and we're going to get to that. So let's take a quick break and come back and talk about theopolitical issues.
Thanks for joining us for our Theopolitico segment. So Caleb, you know, we get introduced to Rain, the main character, who's the actress I mentioned in the last segment, who's so very good at this role. We get introduced to her and her brother Andy, who's also, I think his name David Johansen, incredible at that role. We get introduced to them in part by learning that she's, you know, she's basically an indentured servant to the company that runs the mining colony.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, what ways do you see companies in the U.S. operating in ways that might be similar to indentured servitude? And are there other places that you see that in the world?
Well, luckily, there are no examples of that in modern
I
day
agree.
U.S.
We are
have
fortunate.
luckily
We are
we've
fortunate. Yes.
we've luckily
overcome.
really we've overcome all
We
of
are,
that.
we're very much pro employee, pro blue collar. Like we really celebrate those and make sure that they have all rights. and are
We
not
give the
stuck
power
on-
to the people, and we never let the market decide anything.
That's
luckily,
right.
luckily. Hey, look,
Ouch.
I know, right?
Well played.
Look, you're not going to live that down anytime soon.
I don't want to. It's all right.
Look, companies are all about profit, and so they will take advantage of employees
Yeah.
at every step of the way. And so I was hearing about a local company, for instance, who in the midst of this severe heat wave in San Diego that we never have, but we do right now, it's like 100 degrees, and they're
Yeah,
not giving
crazy,
their
man.
employees who have to stand outside water
What?
to drink. Yes, I know. Like this is a violation. They can bring water. But they don't provide them with water. And so this is how companies operate, right?
Wow.
It is the highest profit margin,
Yeah.
and people are always expendable. People
Unfortunately.
are replaceable, and so they also are. I think a lot of companies are only really concerned with paying the lowest wage they can to keep employment as high as they can within their company. And so we often don't get livable wages, especially when we're talking about larger cities. We've got people who are just trying to find what work they can for low wages, and companies find employees to be replaceable. And I think that maybe that's always existed to some degree, but I think it feels like employees are expendable. And if you can be replaced. And I think that's the way that companies look at people, as if they are just expendable. I heard a story, Mark, recently about someone who died in their cubicle. It took someone like 3 days to find them. Right? You heard this story?
I read this. Yeah. I can't remember the company, but yeah.
So they literally died in service to this company. No one even noticed for like 3 days. And then, that person's just going to be replaced. I mean, I'm not saying that people don't care or whatever, but I'm saying that this is corporate culture. This is what they want, right? Give your life and soul to the company.
Right.
And then you die.
They were saying like, it's good to see Johnson still at his desk.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, his car's still here. He never clocked out. Look how dedicated he is.
That's right.
That's corporate culture. That's indentured servitude that happens here in the United States.
It is certainly the culture that we've created.
Don't care.
It's the culture that we've created, and large companies love high unemployment because it makes people worry about their job, and they're willing to do things that they wouldn't normally be willing to do at their job. They're willing to, like you hear all the stories about Amazon working at Amazon distribution centers and how they don't really give them any real bathroom breaks or any kind of things like that. And so we've got so many ways that sort of indentured servitude is present in our workforce. And then even, like you said, low wages can be part of the problem. The opposite is also true. Some companies are so devious, which seems weird to say, about their employment. For instance, I don't know if this is still true, but at one point, UPS was intentionally overpaying their drivers because they couldn't leave and get a job that paid the kind of money they were making because they weren't qualified for jobs. And so they were doing that so that those drivers would do anything they were told or asked to do. And we see that kind of behavior over and over throughout the business world in the U.S. and around the world even. And
that's one of the complicated things about the economy too, Mark. That like people don't understand like the way that people manipulate the economy in these ways. That like the numbers don't give the whole story about. And
Right.
I mean, the UPS drivers, I'd never heard that. That's insane.
Yeah, it's true.
But not
Actually,
surprising.
I used to live across the street from one, and he basically
Yeah.
even told me, "Yep, it's true. I make enough money that he had a high school education. He was like, with my education and my experience, I'll never make this kind of money anywhere else." And so, yeah, when they tell me I needed to work an extra shift when I was hoping to be with my family, I don't have any choice. I'm going to do it because I
Wow.
can't get another job somewhere else. So
Wow.
listen, let's move on. We could talk
Yeah.
more about that all day long because
Mhm.
it's such a big issue and such an important issue. But I want to move on to this thought. Rain and her friends are,
Yeah.
not surprising, as we've been talking about, heavy-handed, sort of indentured servitude type of companies. They're trying to escape the heavy-handed rule of the indentured servitude company that they work for. And at first, everyone sees Rain as basically a tag along, whose only real role to play is just to get Andy, her
Right.
brother sibling, who's an
Mm-hmm.
android, hence the Andy, I'm assuming, to go. She's going to get him.
I did
to
not
go.
make that connection.
Oh,
Until you
yeah, I'm
just said
assuming
that.
that's what it was. I'm assuming.
Andy, it's short for
Andy the android.
Thank you.
I
Thanks
mean,
for figuring that out for me.
It
Yes.
makes sense. But anyway, she's going on the trip mostly just because they need her, because he won't go unless she goes, and they need him because he can like interface with the operating system of the ships and get the doors to open. But ultimately in this story, she becomes really important.
Yes.
So this is going to feel like a little bit of a strange shift here. But in this election year, could you talk a little bit about how everyone matters and has a role to play? Even when they think they might not?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there are so many people I've heard that aren't planning to vote this election season. So all over the political spectrum. And I've heard real progressives say, well, I'm not planning to vote because of Palestine and the Biden administration's position on Palestine.
Yep. I've heard that a
and
lot.
I've heard a lot of people in the middle say, well, candidates are basically the same, and I'm not planning to vote for that reason. And I've heard conservatives say, well, I'm a true conservative, and I'm not going to vote because I don't like Donald Trump. And so I think that's not voting is in fact voting. And time after time we see statistics that show that for progressive policies and progressive politicians to be elected, that's the way that becomes more likely is with higher voter turnout. And so we need high voter turnout this year. And I think this year in particular, the choice ought to be real clear that we've got the law and order candidate, a prosecutor who happens to be a Democrat this go round.
Right.
And then we've got a felon who incited an insurrection against the country. It seems like a pretty clear choice, no matter what you have traditionally branded yourself, no matter what political party you've been affiliated with in the past. Like, seems like if we're choosing between someone who is a prosecutor and a felon, that makes the choice pretty clearly. Or even, how about this? Someone who has been a respectable citizen and someone who incited an insurrection. Or we could say someone who can speak coherently and someone who can't. Someone who has proven economic policies versus someone who talks a real good game about being a businessman, but
also has proven the inability to have good econ.
Right, through his bankruptcies, through the economy of the United States when he was president. It's so important to vote this year. Please, everyone, get out and vote. That's the way I think about it. What do you think about it, Mark?
No, I'm completely with you, and I'm just going to keep move. I'm going to take what you said and build on it.
Yeah.
It is the most consequential election of my lifetime, of most people's lifetime, and it's this is a make or break moment in the United States. It genuinely is. I don't, and I'm not. If anything, I'm understating the reality here. And so anyone who is treating this election year in the same way that they've treated every other election of their life is missing the boat and is failing their duties as a citizen. And I know that seems strong and harsh, but it's the reality. Every person matters in this election. You can't just sit around and say, well, I'll go cast my vote. Every person needs to be keeping themselves informed. They need to be reaching out to anyone they know who is uninformed or undecided and talking to them about the issues and talking to them about the outcome, talking to them about Project 2025 and what that means, what it will look like on day one in the office, and the things, the horrific things that's going to happen to a great number of citizens of the United States if we allow that to happen. There are no unimportant characters in this story. We are all important and need to be active in our roles. Okay, one more quick question. I'm going to squeeze it in here. So both in the original Alien, we've already talked about the androids a little bit. In the original Alien and now in Romulus, we have androids who get called one thing, and then the androids make the statement, I prefer the term artificial person.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on names and the naming of people, including pronouns?
So I think this is so important. And at our church, one of the things we do is we have naming ceremonies, because we've got a lot of folks in the LGBT community who are transitioning or for a variety of reasons are choosing their own names. And I think it's so important. It's just, first of all, it's just basic human decency to call people what they want to be called. And there shouldn't be any drama about that. This shouldn't be a controversial thing. If somebody asks you to call them something, then just call them that. That's just basic politeness. But it's also, I mean, certainly theological to respect who it is that people are. You know, if we really believe that people are created in the image and likeness of God, that they're a reflection of the divine image, including people who are part of the LGBT community, then that means that we respect them. And by doing so, we're respecting God. And over again, Jesus told us the way we love God is by loving our neighbor. So damn it, just love your
figure
neighbor.
That out, right? Do the math.
If people say, hey, this is how I feel loved, is by you calling, you calling me this name and using the pronouns they, them, then just do it. So that's my hot take on that. How about you, Mark? What do you think?
You stated it perfectly. I'm not going to try to improve on it. Actually, I think that is exactly right in my book as well. So, all right, listen, we could go on and on. I had 3 more questions to ask.
Of course you did. Yeah,
of course. But we don't want to miss out on our favorite segment, the Make Me Look Stupid segment. So we'll take a quick drop and we'll be back on the other side.
Hello, and welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We're entering our final segment, the Make Me Look Stupid segment. Thank you for hanging out for all this time. This is one of our favorite segments, of course, because we get to ask our co-host any question we want and maybe try to make them look stupid, maybe have them make a prediction, maybe just to have something that we're curious about. And so I was going to ask you, Mark, a question technology, but I've decided to pivot because something you said in the last segment really sparked my imagination.
Okay.
And as you were asking me about the consequences of this election and voter turnout and stuff, it got me thinking about another part of the conversation that I've been hearing a lot recently, which is third-party candidates. And this is always a kind of an interesting conversation, but I've known a lot of people who are planning to vote third-party in this election. And I'm curious, do you think there's a role for third-party candidates in the United States generally? And do you think there's a role this election for third-party candidates?
I think generally, yes, we need third-party candidates. As a matter of fact, in my personal opinion, I'd like to see a strong third party develop in the United States so that we can not have these two sides that pull in opposite directions and there doesn't seem to be any conversation. If we could find a third party that's somewhere in the middle ground, it's going to create the opportunity for dialogue that is very needed and necessary, and more movement on the far ends of the spectrums. But I don't think we're doing that right. All of that has to happen grassroots from the ground up, local, and slowly build, and we're not doing that. So that's where I am on just in general. In this election, there's nothing good about a third-party candidate. It's a distraction. It's pulling away. This is once again, such a consequential election that anyone who's going to pull votes away from one of the primary candidates is preventing the larger voice of the direction we want this nation to go from being fully heard. And I think that's a problem. I could just go off on that, but that was my most, I tried to make it as succinct as I could do. What do you think?
Wonderful. Yeah, I agree. I agree both that in general, I think it would be great to have a third party. I think the third part, I think really the Democratic Party, when we get right down to it, is a centrist party anyway.
They are.
I think I think the third party we need is a more progressive third party. But I agree with you. Because I think
if the Democratic Party then becomes the moderator party kind of thing,
or even the voice of reason. I mean, the Republican Party has fallen off the map. I mean, even if we got a third party, all we're doing is replacing, two sane, maybe reinstituting a two sane party system with these people on the fringe. Because I mean, the GOP has just fallen off the map. They don't even hold the conservative values anymore.
Not at all.
And Democrats are centrist at best. And so I think that if we develop a third party that's more on the progressive end of things, that's something that I would certainly like to see. And I agree with you. I think that happens grassroots and gradually. Although whether or not the United States can ever break out of the two-party system, I'm not sure. We've been locked in this for so long that I think it's a little impractical to think we're going to do it. I think this election, though, is absolutely the wrong time to vote for third-party candidates. And I get third-party candidates who are all saying, well, they say that every election. But, I mean, this year we're literally dealing with an insurrectionist and an organization that has a plan to overthrow democracy. I mean, I think that we don't want to be taking votes away from someone who is just trying to establish basic democracy, to keep basic democracy here in the United States. So I think third-party candidates are not the way to go. And in fact, I think instead of fighting to get names on ballots, I think that at this point is mostly about ego, and probably they need to drop out. Here's looking at you, Jill Stein. Probably time to call it quits. So that's my thoughts on that. What's your question, Mark? You got something?
My question is very movie centric. There were a few things.
Good, because I didn't talk about the movie at all.
You had which was an important question.
Yes, thank you.
There were several things that during the movie I went, I don't know, and it kind of bothered me.
Yeah.
But there was one that kept nagging me.
Okay.
How is it that no one else seems to have found or are trying to get to the space station except for this ragtag group of kids who happen to have a ship?
So this is a gigantic size plot hole in the movie, because as you're sitting there watching it, you're like, how can no one see this giant thing orbiting the planet? And if these kids are interested in getting the tech off of it, then why aren't other people interested in that? It's kind of the same way that at the beginning of Aliens, they don't seem to know anything about xenomorphs. And then in this movie, we seem to know about xenomorphs. And it's just one of those things, Mark, that I think you can't think too hard about it or it falls apart. Do you think you think there's some kind of technology that is so sophisticated that it only allows a select group of kids from the mining to find it? Yes. to be able to track this down. I don't know. I think it's just a plot hole. There's no out logicking this. I don't think so. What do you think? Did you come up with
I've thought a little bit about it, because the other part that bothered me of that whole thing was that these kids have, like, they are indentured servants, but they have a ship that can get them off the planet.
I know, like, why don't you just leave? Just leave.
So here's my thing. They did say, I'm trying to make it work, okay?
It's too far away, whatever they need.
They did say that they discovered it while they were dropping off a load. So here's my theory.
Okay.
That ship that they have is a work ship, and they deliver what's being mined to ships off planet and unload. And it was on that there's something about where the space station was and how far away it was, that it only could be detected once you were out of the planet's atmosphere. And so they detected it when they were in this ship that was a work ship, and they were out of the planet's atmosphere dropping off the load of whatever they had to deliver. And so that makes a very small percentage of any of the society that would even know it was up there. That's the only thing I can make work in any way whatsoever that might make some sense.
I like it. It's canon. It's canon. Yes. And I
think I had to work too hard to make that happen, honestly.
The reason they didn't jump on any of those other ships was just because they had connections to the planet, and then they needed the cryopods or something to be able to slip. Yeah. But you know what? All in all, an enjoyable movie, right, Mark?
Really was.
I mean,
loved it. It was fun.
Just take it for what it is. It's a fun sci-fi horror romp. And
it did all of those genres very well. It was scary. It made you jump. It was tense. It was anxiety. It was lots of good sci-fi. It was great. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, great. And not too over the top. I mean, also, a real homage to keeping the xenomorphs kind of not real well seen. There's real, I think, genius in not letting us see what we're jumping at for a while. And that's what this franchise has always done so well. So a lot of fun. So, hey, we're going to do another kind of like fantasy horror movie next week that you've already mentioned.
Yes.
Beetlejuice.
Yes.
Beetlejuice. You said it a third time.
Don't say it a third time.
So, okay. All right. So Beetlejuice, this, I don't know, Mark, you haven't seen it yet. I went to go see it last night. Yeah. And, it feels like the most Tim Burton-esque movie that he has made in a long time. So it's been kind of fun, I think, to see Tim Burton come back, to see Michael Keaton come back. And all of the people in this movie are just people that I feel like I could watch just for hours on their own. Catherine O'Hara, just
she's
people,
so good.
And just so funny. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I hope you'll enjoy it, Mark. And I hope that all of you will enjoy it too. So go ahead and go to the movie theater, watch Beetlejuice before next week. And we hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next week on the Moonshine Jesus Show.
Moonshine